Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. I am here with Adam Cheatham, and you are joining us on the Confluential Live, which is just an informal conversation of what we go over when we're seeing in the marketplace and kind of bring that to light in these conversations. So, if you haven't been here before, thank you so much for joining us. You can absolutely provide your insights, your comments, or anything like that, and kind of join the conversation in whatever platform you're joining us from today. So we're on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and then we'll be on TikTok a little bit later today. So if you head over there and look at Kyler Cheatham, you can find our TikTok live as well. So with that, today we're tackling a subject that's so very real in just the modern enterprise architecture when it comes to how we talk about the relationship between IT and the business. This can be kind of a polarizing conversation of who can own technology strategy or what the role is, but it's really critical that you understand that relationship in your business before you embark on any sort of bigger technology investment, or you're just going to have roadblocks and awkwardness between the two different departments. So with that, I will introduce Adam in here, and you can give us kind of your thoughts on it, and then we can also kind of go into what the audience thinks about it as well. So welcome, Adam. Good morning.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. Always appreciate our Friday morning, afternoon, evening chats. Thanks for everybody joining me. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Today, we are covering a topic that is near and dear to my heart, which is the relationship between IT and the business. I have served as an IT liaison, business liaison of sorts for my entire career. I've been in that position between the business stakeholders who want something from technology and the IT folks who can or can't or won't deliver it. And that conversation is always an interesting one to see from company to company. And what I like about our conversation today is we'll dig into some of the hallmarks of what makes that relationship successful. What are some of the things that you can think about if you feel like maybe it's not? What are some of the indicators that maybe it isn't? And that type of discussion, because at the end of the day, it's like any other relationship in your organization that you should be considering as two equal parties who have an influence on one another that can't exist in business today without each other, right? It's like anything else, sales and operations, right? I sell stuff, you make it. Those types of things. And I actually really like that type of analogy for the relationship between the business and IT, because sales needs something, operations makes it, the business needs something, and IT makes it, right? So that's kind of how the conversation goes, and how it is that develops. The level of clarity that comes from a good relationship is very good. The topic to dig into. You have a lot of the discussion in this is the speed of trust type of things.
Yeah.
But I think it's worth starting with an Office Space quote.
Yeah. Oh, good. I love the Office Space quote.
You can't have the customers talking to the engineers. That's my job. That's my job. That's what I do. You can't do it that way. And to a certain extent, that if that's the way your business functions, where the business can't talk to IT, then maybe there's a different type of challenge that we need to think about, because translating those needs into something that can be built upon is sometimes a key to the relationship. And having a good liaison in the middle is often something that adds a lot of value. So I'm excited about it today.
Yeah, this should be a good conversation. And I think it's important because it's so unique to each business, the relationship between the two, and where that really lives, especially with the rise of things like the digital transformation office and where that is, PMO, what that really looks like, change management. Is that where is that? Is that in HR and completely useless? Or is that in, IT and it takes more of a project management approach? So there's lots to go into there. is a funny story. Adam and I, which we're married, a lot of people think we're like brother and sister, which I think is very weird. But we're married and we met in this same sort of relationship. I was on the business side, he was on like the IT liaison side. And I still think to this day, many of his colleagues on the IT team were like, "You married her? Like, are you serious?" Because like I was so forceful in my early career about, what I needed for my, sales channel and all those different things that I was managing. So we kind of have a unique relationship in the fact that we know that it can not only work, but a beautiful marriage can be birthed from it, and move forward with so much love. So we're going to teach you how to do that in this call
Love
today.
it. Love it. I think I'm gonna jump right to the audience real quick because I think these are great questions to kind of set the stage for the tone and the theme of this. Would you rather be stuck with a system the business chose without IT, or a system IT chose without the business? And then a very similar question: would you rather have IT choose the tech stack with no business input, or the business choose the tech stack with no IT input? And I would much rather the business make decisions and then IT find out than the opposite way around. That's an unpopular opinion with a lot of the folks that I work with, because I work with a lot of technical people where the business already picked it. Now we have this problem. I got to integrate it with this environment. Right. But at the end of the day, they picked it because it serves a purpose. Right. We have an actual business case. Business tends to make decisions based on what they think is going to make money, right? IT tends to make decisions on systems based on what's the most technologically advanced, which isn't a bad thing, but it does often leave more space in the right. We overbought, right? If IT picks it, it'll have all of these cool tech things, and there's nothing wrong with that until the business says, well, that's absolutely worthless to me. And then IT says, well, we can't build that thing that you just asked for because our tech stack doesn't, our super advanced technical things prevent it.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, then why in the world did you buy that? Like, because it's cool. Look at all these technical things it can do. And then the business says, I have no interest in that. I actually have a client right now that is going through a very tough decision-making process with a software platform that they bought 4 years ago technically, because it's coming up on renewal this next year. And the concept was, we bought this so that the business could become their own enablers, right? They could build their own reports. They could be the citizen, quote unquote, citizen developers. And so they bought this platform, but then they said the business can't use it until they train in it. And then the business was like, well, I have no interest in this platform at all. I don't need to be a citizen developer. What are you talking about? And so I just like, well, you can't use it till you're trained in it. And the business is like, fine, I don't want to use it anyway. And now they're in this space where 4 years later, the business hasn't used it at all. And IT says, we need it because we put it here and there. And the business says, I could care less. I'm not paying for that. And I just said, right, but we need it. Like, no, you need it. And so IT says, well, we'll let everybody use it so you can tinker with it and you can play with it. But that ship has set sail. The business is like, well, I haven't been able to use it for 4 years. Why would I start using it now? It's been there this whole time and I've lived without access. I could live without access forever at this point. And now IT bought something that the business isn't interested in. And we have a problem because it's expensive. And we're trying to decide whether or not to renew it. And the only business case for renewing it is, well, we put it in a couple of critical places that now we're stuck with it.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that is all too common. So what do you do to address those?
Well,
like, where do you even start? Sorry, I'm pulling up things.
Who actually owns the technology decisions today? Avery's question here. When ownership is fuzzy, the tech becomes a scapegoat for every business problem. Yeah, there's a bit of finger pointing in this that develops in a bad relationship between business and IT, right? A really good place to start is procurement, right? You can't buy something without approval. So there you go. I can't sign a contract for licensing without somebody approving that purchase. That is the point where this technology decision comes from. And if the business wants to buy Salesforce because they can do their own thing and they can plug in and they want to play with it and this, that, and the other, that's fine. But they need to have a good relationship with IT to be able to say, we want this, we need it to be secure, right? Because at the end of the day, the function behind the software is important, but so is the security in it. And there's a bit of a balance in figuring out how we pull this off, right? I bought Salesforce is less ideal than I'd like to buy Salesforce. What do you need to do to get it up and running?
Mm-hmm.
And then IT has an opportunity to say, all right, well, if we're going to get Active Directory rolling, and you want single sign-on because that's what you're going to ask for, whether you say you need it today or not, you're going to ask for it. You are, and this is well, yeah, you're right. Having IT know it's coming, they can put it in the order of things that need to be built and prioritize it, right? Because that's a key piece of the puzzle in resolving these types of ownership issues, these types of priority issues. Is there's a lot that has to get done. And the last thing you want to do is be in a position where somebody says, well, I already bought it. The money's already spent, so we might as well use it. And now because we spent the money, that's why this is a priority, not because it actually adds value. Because the money's already going out the door, we might as well use it and get something out of it rather than nothing. That's a key part of the problem, and there's a lot that can be done with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, first of all, these comments are amazing. It really is just, we're just here to facilitate the conversation. Having everyone involved in this, because it's going to be different in each business. And that's the point. It doesn't really matter what we say up here. It matters how you address it in an open way with empathy for each side involved in that. So let's go back to, with this example, Salesforce is a perfect example. You guys are on point, which thank you very much. Let's go back to kind of dig into that example. What is procurement's role in that conversation that you feel like it can be kind of that gate to making poor technology decisions? Because that's what we're trying to avoid here, right? It doesn't really matter who makes the technology decisions in that sense. You need to know that for your organization. But the goal is to not lose money or to lose mind share, right?
Yeah. Well, and procurement's a good example of a single potential solution, right? Now, procurement often gets stuck in the same bucket of, well, they just say no, right? Because it's expensive and this, that, and the other. Well, that's not exactly how that goes. They read the contracts and they say, this contract says you give up your right to sue us if we screw up your business.
Yeah.
Forever. Well, we're not going to sign that type of contract because if you do screw up our business through some type of a data breach or something, we are going to sue you. But right here in this contract, it says you can't do that. And there are contracts that say that, right? So procurement says we got to go through these red lines. We can't agree on these things. There are those types of conversations. So that's one way of creating a stage gate. And some organizations are large enough where procurement plays that role. And they're structured enough where those types of money decisions do go through procurement. And that's sometimes a good thing. It's sometimes restrictive, though, because just in the same way the relationship between the IT and the business becomes, well, IT said no and won't tell me why. Well, procurement said no and they won't tell me why, right? So the bigger part of the conversation is, how do you have an open conversation based on value that is built on a relationship that's in a good, positive space, right? At the end of the day, when IT says no, the business may or may not understand that. And it's IT's job to help them understand why.
Yeah.
And if they can't, then maybe the reason is a bad one, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That discussion, though, is based on a relationship that gets built way before that conversation happens, right? I want to do this. And you say, and IT says no. And that's all you get. And the business goes back and they call their VP and they say, IT says no. VP picks up the phone and says, and calls CIO and says, what in the world is happening? Why can't I not have this? It's one of our critical goals for the year set by the CEO, and I can't hit my targets without this. And now we have a problem of a conversation that's not based on trust, it's based on accusations, right? And hearsay and all the types of things. And CIO hopefully knows what's going on and is able to say, look, man, maybe we did a bad job of explaining this to your guy, and he did a bad job explaining it to you, but we went through this conversation, and there are some key problems that we have with contracts or with functionality. It doesn't do this thing that you asked it to do. And so the function that you're looking for, you're not going to get from that. We're looking into finding out how to tell you yes on something else. Okay, now our conversation's turned around, right? It's different when the CIO goes, well, I got no clue, and now we're picking up phone calls and we're yelling at people. Why did you tell them no? And he said, well, our tech stack doesn't work that way. And then you have all of these arguments that are going, and then somebody on the business side says, just do it.
And that's usually the CEO, right? Like, it has to go to that level for someone to be able to make that decision, because then
And
we
now
have
everybody's
exactly, we have executive members fighting, right? And then they're like, well, why don't we just ask the CFO, right? Because why don't we just let the cost make the decision? And then we have a whole nother conversation, a person involved in this, which, I mean, I'm not at all saying the CFO shouldn't be involved and finance shouldn't be involved, which is why we're talking about procurement. But we have to talk about, like, just the dynamics of the relationship between building those two things.
Yeah, and finance is a part of the business, right?
Exactly.
They're a part of this relationship too. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to understand this question. Another one from Leo. So thank you, Leo, for the great questions on LinkedIn here. What if the money is already out the door? What if someone spent the money? And even back up, exactly, how does that even happen? Like, how all of a sudden do we get supply chain being like, hey, our production being like, our bot is broken, can you fix it? And IT be like, okay, well, what bot? Like, what do you mean, your bot? I don't know about any bot. So one, no, I
And
can't
this
fix it.
data from where?
Yeah, like, what do you mean? It from Reddit,
Oh,
or like,
we wrote a Python API into that. Like, you
yeah,
did what? Yeah, we
right.
hired a developer. Like, excuse me. So when the money's already out the door, you have a decision to make, right? What do we do? How does that happen? That happens intentionally, right? But not on the business side. That happens from somebody. Well, it does. There is a bit of that, and it can happen in IT as well, right? IT bought something that they thought the business wanted, and the business says, "I don't want that," but we already paid for it, so you're going to use it. But what happens is, number one, the conversation doesn't develop around why it is we're doing this. What do we need? And there's a function that your organization should have that is that liaison conversation, right? Now, some organizations are small, 50 people. IT is a small department. And so one of the roles that gets overlooked in that type of an organization is somebody who is the relationship between the business and IT. And in that scenario, it often will come from IT because the technical acumen in the business just doesn't exist to be able to go and seek that relationship. They're focused on figuring out how to run a business, and their visibility into what IT can add for value is limited because their company is small. As you grow, sometimes there's a person, a CIO, or a digital transformation executive, whatever. I don't know what. So those are titles that tend to develop in that space, but it's a role that develops that is a person or a team that starts to become that liaison. Sometimes it happens on individual teams, right? So I've been in organizations where that role develops and on the teams that have the most IT technology, right? Finance is a good one. You have somebody who's responsible for working with IT to be able to say, these are our problems, this is how we're building it. Production often starts to live in this space when we start talking and figure out how we run schedules, but it starts to become an individual on each business side team who starts to see the potential in technology, then reaches out, right? It's that relationship starts to grow. eventually it becomes a team whose purpose is this sheer function. And in some cases, it's a business process and technology team. I've heard it called. I've heard it called the change control board. I've heard it called an enterprise PMO. And I've built all three of those for organizations to say, this team, I don't care what you call it. And I literally have two companies that I work with right now. One I built a PMO for, one I built a CCB for,
Mhm.
and they serve the same function, which is to create a conversation where the business says, I need this, and IT says, we can do this. And now we start talking. How do we
Mhm.
solve this? What are our priorities, right? That's another key part of the conversation because there's only so much capacity in IT,
Exactly.
and you start to develop it that way. So when you start to create structure, that's how you start to solve that problem. And it has to be an open conversation. There are parts on both sides that need to be able to have that open conversation as well.
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense, and I think a lot of times IT can get this, like, kind of basement dwellers, grumpy representation, and a lot of times you have to remember, like, why they got that, right? Because a piece of technology was dropped on them, they're like, "Hey, manage this, develop this," and you're like, "Wait, like, I that wasn't on our priority list at all, like, and now we have to shift everything that I've been putting my time into for 60 hours a week, throughout this entire piece, and now I have to
Yeah,
pivot to something else." So let's get to some of these other questions over here. If you see one, Adam, that you like, definitely.
I
um, your hands off. Okay, great.
you go
um,
for it.
so I love Avery's point here, and she lays out kind of this dynamic that we're seeing right now with a lot of modern technology, right? Where we're talking about things like AI and things like that the business is talking technical, but they might not understand what that actually means. So the C suite says we need to be data driven. IT builds a data lake. 2 years later, nobody uses it. At what point do we admit that the problem isn't the technology? It's the business that doesn't actually know what question they're trying to answer. How would you address?
Well, for starters, the data lake isn't going to do anything unless you have a tool that's meant to organize that data and turn it into a view, right? The data does you nothing. It's the report that's built from it, right? The things that you're able to do with that data to draw conclusions. That's the first part of it. So that's a failure on both sides, right? But I think that the bigger conversation here is that in these types of areas, IT says, I built a data lake. The business doesn't know what to do with it. They won't use it. And business says, I don't know what a data lake is. What the hell are you talking about? It's like, well, a data lake is an unstructured, environment where all of your data lives and is allowed to just kind of. And the business goes, I got a job to do, dude. And what you're speaking to me is not my language. It's some type of space language, data lakes and stuff. I don't know what you're talking about. And that starts to deteriorate pretty quick. I think that the problem here is that when you start pointing fingers, that's what you're already toast,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You're already dead meat at that point because this is a problem on both sides. And the answer really isn't anything other than, well, we have a problem to solve together anyway. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter why we can't use our data lake. It's we have a tool that might be useful. How to use it? And then IT has a responsibility for saying, here is a tool. This is how you use it from a technical perspective, right? They have a technical acumen that they need to be able to describe to the business on what the function is and what the benefits are. They need to be able to own that, right? Developers don't like to talk about it that way. They're just, I'm just here to write code. That's bullshit. You're not here to just write code. You're here to add value.
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't
Love
care
that.
how much code you write. I don't care how big your data lake is. If it's not something that you are showing the business how to use, you're not doing your job. On the flip side of that, the business has a responsibility to learn a little bit of technical acumen too, right? This isn't I want a new shiny tool and it's your job to build it for me. Um, and the example that I have of this is actually kind of funny. And you see YouTube shorts and stuff on this these days, but back in the day, I used to work at this country club in high school and into college, and this guy, fancy country club, right? Um, this guy lived in the neighborhood that was built on the golf course, and he had this Ferrari. Nobody taught him how to drive it. He just thought it was cool to have it, right? This new shiny piece of technology. It's fancy, it's expensive. Like, this is so cool. I have a Ferrari.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes and tries to use it, drives it to the golf course, 2 miles, right? I kid you not, this thing had under 100 miles on it. And as the gate's opening for him to leave, he decides for the first time, never tried it, never had it at speeds higher than 25, he's going to gun it. He stomps on the gas. He puts it, lets off the clutch, puts it in first gear. It spins out and runs right into a tree. Right? He has nobody taught him how to drive his car. Nobody had taught him how to use this technology, and he goes and runs it. Right? It runs it and dogs it. Right? Like this is a conversation. It's his responsibility as the user
Yeah.
to think, I don't know what I'm doing here. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's a car. It's just a software program with
Yeah.
lots of applications. It's not though. It's your job to figure out how to use it effectively and be
Mm-hmm.
open-minded on how to do that. Because one of the other things that CEO sometimes tells that VP is, right, you want to spend $1 million in a year on a software program, and you haven't.
Yeah.
We told you no because you already had that. No, it's not called Salesforce. It's called Microsoft Dynamics
Yeah.
CRM, and you have that function. He goes, well, I don't want that. I don't use that. I didn't use it in my last job. I don't care. You have that functionality. It's your responsibility to figure out how to use it and use it well and use it effectively, right? So there's a conversation in this that there's so many discussions that are based on pointing the finger, that are built on a lack of trust, that is just that's been there for a long time, and it's hard to rehabilitate that conversation. The only way to rehabilitate that conversation is to start having it out loud and start pulling the thumb and saying, how can I help this?
Mm-hmm.
How can I teach the business what they have and how to use it? How
Mm-hmm.
can I learn a little bit more about what technology can do so that I can lean into it and figure it out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I get fired up about this because it's so funny that people get so pissed, and it's like, what? That doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some
Well, I
companies
think,
don't. So,
yeah,
yeah.
they it depends on the culture, right? They kind of like pump themselves up, especially if it's like this culture of IT versus somebody else. And that's always kind of how they see themselves as the minority to the organization. And it's not that way whatsoever, right? Or it shouldn't be that way. That it should be something as their core business function. I think that starts with, do you see IT as a cost center? Like, is it still an area in which just costs you money, or does it add value to the business in the way that you include it in those business conversations? Because you can't just expect it or their entire organization just to change overnight, right? They
Yeah.
haven't been through that, especially many of the senior leaders in IT. That's why we see people being moved from HR, from the business, from that side into IT leadership, because they are trying to assimilate those two different pieces. And sometimes that's a great choice, but a lot of times when we have like a VP of business systems, that's a 30-year career IT person that has always been siloed. And now with the modern business, technology is certainly the backbone of how everything access. That wasn't, they're no longer the computer fixers. So the evolution of not only the IT department in the last 10, 20 years, but also the modern CIO, right? We used to not really talk a lot about CIOs because we didn't really know like what they were doing over there. Now the modern CIO is a business leader, right? They're um, a main stakeholder in all of those different conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So that needs to be a critical piece of that
Yeah.
function. And, overseeing a lot of these kind of departmental IT liaisons, because that's a very hard job, right? To go in and get them to trust you and listen to you and know that essentially you have their best, needs in mind as well. So I think it's a big piece in that. So let's do a little ERP question down here. I always love to get into the ERP. Why does the business think an ERP will fix a broken process while IT knows an ERP will expose every broken process in the that the business has ignored? Spoken like a true
Uh, well,
IT.
somebody's pointing a finger in this.
Yeah, right.
Maybe pointing two fingers in this.
Mhm,
So let's break this down from a relationship perspective, right? We're talking about the relationship between IT and business. So business says we have all of these broken processes. IT can't seem to help us fix them, so we're going to get a new system. We're going to fix our broken process. And IT goes, your processes aren't broken. We got this fantastic green screen thing right here, and it does everything you've ever needed it to do. And whatever it is you need to do that's not in there, we can build it. And the business says, I don't want that green screen. I said, well, why not? Well, it doesn't work. It's like, well, yeah, it does. Here you go. And they said, well, I can't do this. And I said, well, that's not a technology problem. Well, a new ERP will fix that. No, well, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm going to go buy a new ERP. That's how that goes, right? So now, the reason the business thinks an ERP will fix broken processes is because they're looking for a quick fix,
mhm,
right? And in most cases, it's not that way. It's the ERP will take your broken process and
mhm,
show you where the breaks are more quickly. So IT saying it'll expose every broken process the business has ignored has a grain of truth to this. So I am gonna take a side on this. Where usually when this conversation goes this way, IT is usually right.
mhm,
Where it's not your software that's broken. 9 times out of 10, it's not your software that's broken. It's your process that's broken. And you want to know what's actually going to happen with the new ERP that you think you're going to buy? They're going to change your broken process to something that's different than what you want, and you're going to
mhm,
ask for the broken one back anyway. And we're going to spend $1 million doing it. And the business, no, it'll solve all of our problems. So that's how that conversation goes a lot of times. On the flip side, when the business says this will fix my broken process, there are some scenarios where this is also true.
mhm,
Where the business is correct in this,
mhm,
where I have these broken processes that have become how we custom coded this software over decades of use, and now I can't unravel those customizations because it will cause all of that custom code to come collapse on itself. I'll pull this string and it will break here, there, and everywhere else. So in this, we overbuilt at
mhm.
this point. So yeah, an ERP that cuts from a straight line from
Yeah,
point A to point B, as
mhm,
opposed to, well, you got to go from point A to point A, point one, point two,
yeah,
point three, point four, all over the place to get to B. That's And the business says that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. So
mhm,
there are some times where that does happen. So why does the
yeah,
business think an ERP will fix broken processes? Because sometimes it will.
yeah,
Why does IT think that the ERP will just expose the processes that the business has ignored and are already busted anyway? Because sometimes it will.
yeah,
What I think is more important here is to figure out why these processes are broken.
mhm. I just
And
think that no one wants to take the time to do that a lot of times, you know?
conversation.
Yeah.
I promise you that conversation will take less time than implementing a new
I
ERP.
totally agree with you. I mean, we obviously get a front row seat to this because a lot of times when we show up, people are so excited about talking about new things, new technology, new, and a lot of times they are, taken aback that we're asking about, like, well, that sounds super cool. We're pumped about new technology too. But what do you have today? Like, how do you get this produced today? How is this, you know, this look today, right? And all of those different pieces. And that piece of it is so critical, but it requires discipline. It's just like data management. Like it requires discipline and grind and going through painful things to make sure that you're actually have the foundation to build that on. So I think there's a little bit of understanding in that as well. A lot of people just want that quick fix of, oh, I plug in AI and it will all of a sudden
It'll
go.
fix it. AI will know what to do. Like, no,
Yeah.
AI is just going to make it worse and then move the goalpost farther away. But I like this comment from Leo again. How do you, as a third party, help the line of business acknowledge and admit the
Yeah.
process is broken through a conversation and a root cause analysis, right? And um, probably one of the most shocking responses to that is maybe it's broken and maybe we shouldn't fix it,
Hmm.
right? Like there are, I promise you, chasing perfection is going to cause you more problems than just getting through it. And some things are broken and they're just going to be that way.
Hmm.
And solving it with technology is not going to help that broken thing become less broken. And
Hmm.
sometimes when you start looking at it, well, technology is an easy fix. It might be, but it's probably also expensive. Well, it's hard to fix that broken process. Okay, well, then if it's too expensive and it's too hard to fix it, maybe we should just leave it. Sometimes that's the answer, right? And this is where that conversation between like a change control board or PMO starts to come into the conversation on maybe we should leave that broken thing alone and
Hmm.
focus on fixing other things.
Hmm.
If we chase perfection in everything, we will achieve good enough in nothing. And
Hmm.
sometimes that's what we need to be able to do. We need to be able to run a business, right? Not have all of our processes perfect so that my life is easy. Like
Hmm.
your job is hard, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
And we're okay with that. Your job is hard, business is hard, technology is hard. The conversation of building a relationship between IT and the business, it's all hard. So
Hmm.
let's just accept that and
Yeah.
move on. It's broken.
Absolutely.
Okay. Why? And what is the value of fixing it?
Hmm. Yeah, and I think this is the point of going through that discovery piece. I mean, a lot of times, Adam, talks about how we, sit in these process workshops, and there's the production manager that thinks the process goes one way, and then all of a sudden, there's the actual operator that's like, we haven't done it that way in 10 years, and it's like, wait, what? Why? And it's like, well, because that system that you pushed on us doesn't do what we needed to do, and our job is to get product out the door, so we had to do what we needed to do to get our job
Mhm.
done. And that's a big kind of eye-opening piece for the business of saying, oh, well, maybe I didn't exactly know what was going on here. And our processes need an additional look because I was unaware, right, that the end user wasn't using that $1 million
Mhm.
system that I thought was bought for them to be more efficient. They've gone back to their spreadsheets, right, because it doesn't do what it needs them to do. So I think that's a huge piece of it. So
But let's also this tinker with AI in this conversation too. Well, I want to build an AI that does this. You mean your job, an AI that does your job?
yeah,
Let's start thinking long term about that too, right? I want an AI that automates this, that automates that, that automates. Then what do you do, right?
yeah,
Where does your value come from? So before we get over our skis on all the problems that we need to have technology fix, let's think about the problems that we can also fix ourselves by doing things the hard way. And there's a bit of that that's a little bit facetious in it, right? I think at the end of the day, technology still needs to serve a function, and your business can't operate without it. And that's okay. I'm all right with that. So we gotta
yeah,
know what problems we're gonna solve and what problems we're
absolutely.
not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of times ERPs have this mindset of standardization, like let's get our act together, grow up as a company, and have an ERP system. A lot of times the board is also pushing for that, especially if you're like a mid-market startup that got, you're right in that 500 million revenue mark, and they're like, okay, we're going to become $1 billion business. How do we do that? And maybe that is a good choice for you. But I know Adam and I talk to a lot of businesses that ERP is not a good fit for them because they're so specialized. And that's
Well,
when you
that's exactly what Jason's saying,
oh,
right?
good. Jason,
Um,
come over here.
yeah, like sometimes we look at replacing our ERP, we spend a whole bunch of money on it, and then we find out all we did was make our problem more expensive
For
because
sure.
we didn't solve the actual problem. Our legacy system has done this for ages, and that's okay.
Mhm.
And let me, like one of the things that I think is really fascinating is AI is actually enabling a lot of organizations to get more out of their legacy systems by bridging those gaps a bit more effectively. We got to identify them, right? Otherwise, you end up building a bridge across a gap that you can't span, and you have a bridge collapse like you did in China this last week,
Yeah.
which was, if you haven't seen that video, look it up. Bridge collapses in China. That is, holy smokes. That's an interesting thing to watch. But at the end of the day, if we can get more out of the system that we have, and the answer is we just don't like it, maybe the answer is it doesn't matter if you don't like it. Now, sometimes the answer is, look, we need to modernize, and we need to get into a system that allows us to attract younger talent who are like, I mean, my grandparents use these green screen systems, because there are people out there these days now whose grandparents did use those green screen systems,
Yeah.
right? And that's okay. That's fine. If you're looking to attract younger talent, that's fine. And that's part of your purpose in this whole strategic transformation. It needs to have that strategic goal, though. It's not it's going to fix our broken processes, so we're just going to spend a bunch of money on that, and we'll throw money into the wind and see which vendor's there to collect the most. That's a terrible way of looking at it. You have to know it has a purpose, and then you have to know behind that purpose what it is you're giving up to get it.
Absolutely. And I think it's almost like understanding again what you have now and embracing that piece of it. Even for like if it's an intern, right? If you're going to say we're going to use this until we have the time to evaluate something, ERP is a years long decision, right? It's a huge decision for your business. It's not something that can be made rash, and it's certainly not something that you can be like, hey, I used this at my last company. Well, that's not helpful at all, right? It means that you know how to use it. I used Facebook.
That means you know how to use the system that they built.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't at all mean that. So I think it's just, one of those different things. But thank you for, the insight here. It definitely is an important conversation in understanding what is best for your business. And that takes, big leadership to be able to do that, to bring all of these different pieces together. So I'd love to leave in these last couple of minutes of saying, like, maybe you have a really terrible relationship between the IT and the business right now. How do you begin to heal that so that you can make these great decisions together? But right now, they're going head to head, especially in a conversation where the business is like AI, 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 and the IT department is like, "What do you mean? Like you are still on a 30-year-old green screen. Like, what would you like us to do with AI at this moment when you don't even know what that means?"
Well, I mean, there are a lot of different ways to answer that question, right? You have a troubled relationship. Sometimes it's to seek an outside set of eyes on where are we sideways, so that they can bridge some of that gap. When the business says this way, they actually mean that they need this piece of functionality, and then IT starts to pick up on that conversation. Donuts, yes. Donuts, the solution to everything.
The piece.
There's actually nothing wrong with food, right? Food's a good thing. It's a bridge builder too, right? I'd stay away from booze if the relationship's that bad. But the answer is to lean into finding a way of understanding why the gap is there, why the problem is there, and understanding that both sides have something to contribute to that, right? The business says, well, they've been telling me that I can't have these things for ages. And the IT says, well, that's because you got your own developers over here writing random code that doesn't go through any type of a vetting process. You guys just deploy it to production. We can't figure out who in the world's decision was to allow you to do that. But we got to go through a process, test, retest, deploy, right? And you're just launching stuff. And then you're mad at me because I can't fix the broken stuff that you just put into production, right? So, well, sit down, have a conversation, open your mind, and have an adult in the room sometimes. And I realize we're all adults, but somebody who can sit and say, who can see the temperature at the point where it's about to tip, not
Mhm.
after. Like, it's easy to see what happens when things blow up. Like, well, that
Mhm.
was a stupid thing to
Yeah,
say.
that was
It's hard to figure out when that person's about to say something that shouldn't be said and
Mhm.
redirect, right? So having a person in the room, whether it's internal to you or a third party who can understand how we had this conversation,
Mhm.
where did our relationship start to kind of come apart, and how can we start to rebuild it, right? You start creating that, and you have to ask. And the way that I've done it is, I have conversations with everybody. I
Mhm.
don't. I go and I talk to everybody in the business. What do you
Mhm.
think about the relationship between the business and IT? And I get all of their feedback. And I talk to IT. What do you think about the relationship between IT and the business? Why do you guys think these things about each other? Because most of the venom that comes across in this conversation is false. Well, they just want to screw us. Like, they just no. I promise you, everybody for the most part wants to do a good job. You have a bad egg here and there, and we can find those people, but find somebody that can talk to everybody
Mhm.
and understand all the points of view in it, and then identify where the problem areas are, right?
Mhm.
And then create a structure for talking about them.
Mhm.
And sometimes those conversations need to happen one-on-one, and then one-on-one with this person, then one-on-one with that person, so that you can get both sides, and then you can move them both individually closer before you
Mm.
put them in a room together, right? Sometimes the relationship is troubled enough that you put them in the same room and they're just going to go
Yeah,
right back into patterns.
doesn't even matter what anybody says. They could be like, "I love you, you're the best," and it doesn't all they hear is like, "Oh, okay, now you're trying to, do all of these things, get me to do this." So,
Now you must be lying to me
yeah,
because you're telling me something nice. That means you're
yeah,
hiding something.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
fixing, right? There's a lot of barriers you got to break down that have been built up in this, right? And then you have an open conversation, and you make it about the business and IT accomplishing a goal together, right?
Mhm,
And most times that goal starts with, what does the business want? That is something that IT needs to get used to. Your job is to give the business what it wants if you can. Your job is to say yes if you can first,
mhm,
right? Yes, I can look into that and I can see how we might make that possible. No, not a no, that's going to be hard. You might find that you're right and that
yeah,
is hard and not possible. Great. But your job isn't to say no and jump to a
exactly.
conclusion, it's to go
Yeah,
research.
yeah,
And then that conversation starts to boil around, what does the business want? What are our priorities?
mhm,
And what you'll find is most of the things that people butt heads over
mhm,
are things that end up low on the priorities list.
mhm,
It's the craziest things, the things that cause the biggest problems and the biggest rifts in trust. Yes, the business to prioritize them, and they fall to the bottom. And
mhm,
the business stops requesting those stupid things,
mhm,
and because they realize that they're not high priorities, and the
yeah,
stupid things may have leaning too hard on the IT side of the relationship. So the business starts requesting these things that are
mhm,
caused that are flashpoints, and the problem starts to solve itself. Right? We
mhm,
start to say, the business says, these are the things that I want first, and then
mhm,
IT's answer has to be, you can have the can't. Let's start with what it can't be. It can't be, you can have this one and this one, but not that one. It's
mhm,
a, okay, I can give you this or that, right?
mhm.
If you got five things in the top five, I can give you number one, but number one is going to take our whole team for the next 6 months. Is number two, three, four, or
Mhm. Oh, he's lost in the cloud.
coming back? Some IT guy out there
I
just
know.
bug on me.
Yep, yep, absolutely. They're like, "This guy, we've
We
had enough."
start prioritizing, right? I can do number one, or I can do two, three, four, and five
Mhm,
in 3 months. I can do number one in 6 months, or I can do two through five in three. And then you put the decision back on the business. Which do you want? What has more
mhm,
value? And now we're having a discussion about, what can we achieve together? How can we solve business problems? That's how you start having that. You start to understand the rift, where it came from. You start to redirect people's thoughts, I love this. Get out of the email, chats and texts, get in front of
Mhm.
people.
Mhm.
See people, man. Like if your business and your IT have a problem in their relationship, let's get them in a room,
Mhm.
right? Part of your problem may be that you do have a work from home policy that
Mhm.
lets people be keyboard warriors instead of effective employees, right? So have some conversations face to face and have some soft skill types of discussions. Talk to people one on one, find out where the problem is, and then after that, start to look into the things that we can achieve together. Because once we start to understand where the problems are, start to patch the holes, right? Then you point people at a job they can do together.
Mhm.
And now we're on the same side, right? If you point people at the same problem and to have them solve it together, they become teammates. If you put it in the middle, they become adversaries, right? Put it
Mhm.
between them and they become adversaries. Put it in front of them both and they become teammates.
Yeah, I think and a lot of that has to do with the communication style, right? Like, a lot of times when we're doing Teams messages or something like that, we don't really know what the people are, saying. They could say, "Okay," right? Are they mad about this, or do they hate me, or do they just simply mean, "Okay," right? So, um, there's lots of that comes down to communication style, but sometimes it does take that outside opinion. And even like the org structure of the modern IT department is really tough to decide, like, well, where is the business? Is the digital transformation team in IT? Is it in the business and they work closely with IT? Is there an IT liaison? So having, like, an outside perspective on how you organize that is always really helpful as well, because it's very
Mhm.
difficult to build that, especially now that everyone in the organization touches some sort of technology, right? And we talked to a business a couple last week that was like, I'm nervous about this because we're talking to forklift drivers here, right? Their job isn't super technical, but they're still going to have to utilize this technology to do every point of their job. And that's a big piece to understand how that actually comes down to facilitation. So, well, good. Well, this has been such an amazing conversation. We're usually here every Friday, right? For the most part, depending on travel schedule. But we always want to hear your feedback. Tell us what you want to hear. This is one thing that we've been seeing happen a lot lately, especially as people are, being forced sunsetted off their system, or they're, looking at these newer ways to approach technology. It's going to have to come between how do you work together as a team. Do you have that type of environment in your overall culture, or is it business versus IT all the time, right? So with that, any closing thoughts, Adam, before we kind of break?
I just have this thought process of organizations that figuratively put the two in a room and turn the lights off and see who survives.
Mm.
Don't do that, because I promise you, the toughest people will survive, and sometimes they are the hardest to really bridge the gap with. So uh, we don't need a knife fight over this. We just
Mhm.
need to figure out how to work together and start to become teammates. And it's an organization. That's what you are, right? Um, I worked with somebody ages and ages ago, and um, it was an ERP transformation. And I walk in. So he's the head of IT, and you're always curious where this is going to come from. But so what is your role in this ERP thing to give the business what they want?
Mhm.
Okay. What happens if this and that? My job is to figure out how to give the business what they want, and I
Mhm.
will teach them how to use it.
Mhm.
Okay. How does that work? It's like, well, I train everybody on my team. Give the business what they want. Figure it out.
Mhm.
That's that. There's a little bit of that that's dance off. Yes, there we go. I love it. See, and now we're making jokes about it. It could be fun. Yeah. We got donuts. We got this gigantic sugar rush, and we'll just
Dance it
maybe
out.
yeah, we'll get a disco ball and a fog machine and just get after it. Somebody will end up doing the moonwalk, and it will be the person that you never expected it was, and all of a sudden we're laughing about it, right? Team building is an important thing. So, anyway, I'm gonna get off my soapbox and just say that this is something that can be done. This relationship can be healed. if it's in trouble, and that's okay. You know.
Absolutely. I think it's important to know there's a way forward. It's just very hard to find the way forward, which is super valid, right? So, of course, if we can help, shoot us a DM. If you have had any specific questions, our DMs are always open, or you can reach us, Kyler at the Confluential, or Adam at the Confluential is a way to get in touch with us as well. So, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We're always happy to have the conversation and really appreciate, this great engagement. This is really what helps people figure out this very hard decision is, what are all these considerations that I could think about? And a lot of that comes from what you guys say and share in the comments. So we really appreciate that. We will see you next week, and we hope everyone has a great weekend. Bye.